When you think about getting better at driving, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For most people, it's probably, your inputs,
Hmm.
how you steer, how you brake, how smoothly you accelerate. We tend to obsess over what we do inside the car.
But the thing is, and all the sources we looked at for this deep dive point to this, while your inputs matter, the real challenge to your stability often comes from forces you just can't control.
Forces acting completely outside the vehicle.
Exactly. And these external influences are, well, they're consistently called out as the most overlooked dangers that drivers face.
Okay, so let's dig into that. We're doing a deep dive specifically on those outside forces. Things like the wind, the road itself, and just the basic physics that are always at play that can suddenly throw a vehicle's handling completely off.
Right.
It seems a bit like learning to sail. You can be perfect with the rudder, but if you're ignoring the wind and the tide, you're going to end up in trouble.
That is a perfect analogy. Our whole mission today is to get past the basics and give you a framework for uh, recognizing and adapting to these external conditions that you just have to deal with.
And this isn't just theory, right?
Not at all. It's a shortcut to understanding why your car might suddenly behave in a way you don't expect. It improves your ability to anticipate, and that, critically, is what reduces your risk when things go wrong.
Because the central problem that all the safety researchers point to is that drivers are mostly just oblivious to these overlooked dangers.
Huh.
The moment a car starts to skid, the driver is almost always just reacting to something that was set up moments or even minutes earlier by a force they just didn't account for.
So we're going to look at what these forces are, both the constant ones and the sudden ones, how they work together, and how they can cause that rapid loss of control.
But to understand the slide, we have to start with the forces that are always working to keep you safe.
We have to start with the foundational physics of control.
Right. We take them for granted because they're always there, but they are the silent partners in every single mile you drive. And if they stop working, you stop driving safely.
Let's start with the most obvious one, but maybe the one that's least understood in terms of driving dynamics. Gravity. We all know it keeps us on the earth.
Sure, but its relevance here is a bit more complicated than just holding the car down. We're not, driving on the moon.
Exactly. The sources really stress that gravity provides the crucial downward pressure you need to create grip. Without gravity pushing the tires onto the road, you get no friction. No friction, no control.
But gravity's influence isn't static, is it? It shifts around.
And that is the key insight. It shifts through a phenomenon called load transfer.
Ah, load transfer. That's the secret sauce. So if I say slam on the brakes, the car's mass or its inertia wants to keep going, so it shifts forward.
Precisely. When you decelerate fast, the weight, or the effective gravity, momentarily piles up over the front axle. This gives you a massive increase in grip on the front tires, which is great for braking. But it simultaneously unloads the rear tires, which means you have much less grip back there. And the opposite happens when you accelerate hard. The load shifts backward.
So my ability to brake or even to turn isn't some fixed number. It's more like a dynamic budget that's changing every second.
That's a great way to put it. And that load transfer, that budget, directly impacts the next critical force, friction.
Which is the force that opposes motion between your tires and the road.
Mm-hmm.
Friction really is the king of control then. It's what lets you go, stop, and turn. But what I found fascinating in the sources was how they quantified this relationship. They called it the coefficient of friction.
The coefficient of friction is, well, it's essentially a number that tells you how much grip is available, how sticky the surface is. On dry pavement, that coefficient is high. On a sheet of ice, it's incredibly low.
So every vehicle operates within this limited friction budget.
Yes. And every single thing you do, braking, accelerating, steering, it spends some of that budget.
And if you use 100% of your friction budget on, say, heavy braking,
You have literally zero left for steering.
that's why braking hard while turning is so dangerous, especially when the road is wet.
You've hit the nail on the head. You're asking your tires to do two things at once, and if the total demand exceeds the available friction, stability is gone instantly.
Okay, what about air resistance? Or drag?
Most people just think about drag in terms of, fuel economy.
Yeah, better mileage.
And that's a big part of it. But dynamically, it's the force that's always trying to slow your car down as it moves through the air. At low speeds, you barely notice it.
But it gets much stronger the faster you go.
It increases exponentially. So the shape of your car matters a lot here. Trying to push, say, a big van through the air at 70 miles an hour takes way more energy than a sleek sports car.
So drag is actually a stabilizing force, in a way, because it's always working to slow you down.
It is. And speaking of forces that increase exponentially, we have to talk about inertia. An object in motion wants to stay in motion.
Inertia is what makes it hard to get a car moving from a stop, but it's also what makes it terrifyingly difficult to stop it.
Because the energy you have to get rid of is proportional to the square of your speed. So if you double your speed, you don't double the stopping distance, you quadruple the energy you need to dissipate.
Wow.
Inertia is why a heavy truck, or any vehicle at high speed, needs so much more room to stop. It's the silent amplifier of risk.
And the last constant force, the one we all feel when we go around a corner, is what we call centrifugal force.
Right, and we should probably clarify this one a little. Centrifugal force is that feeling of being pushed to the outside of the turn.
Pushed against the car door.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the actual physical force that's keeping you from flying off the road is pulling inward. It's called centripetal force, and it's generated entirely by the friction between your tires and the road.
Okay, so when I take a corner, my car's inertia wants to go straight, but the centripetal force, which is my grip, is pulling the car into the turn.
And if you ask for more centripetal force than your friction budget can provide, you just go too fast, the car can't pull inward anymore. It follows its inertia.
And you enter a slide.
You enter a slide. That's the constant battle right there. Gravity gives you the platform, friction gives you the control, and inertia is always trying to break that control.
Which is a perfect transition to our next section. The sudden, chaotic things that can instantly betray all those constant forces. If friction is the king, these are the saboteurs.
Yeah, we're moving from the predictable physics to the immediate, unpredictable dangers. Any sudden external force that's strong enough can just overwhelm the car's stability.
And recognizing them is the real hallmark of defensive driving.
Absolutely. The sources broke them down into a few categories. The first one is pretty straightforward. Impact from another object.
Getting sideswiped, hitting a big piece of debris, an animal on the road.
A clear, immediate trigger. The next two are environmental, and they require a lot more awareness. First up, strong winds. Wind is moving air. It has kinetic energy, and when it hits the side of your car, it applies a real, substantial sideways force. This is a huge deal for vehicles with a big side profile.
Oh, for sure. SUVs, vans, trucks. I felt this driving a rental van across a long bridge once. I felt like I had to constantly steer into the wind just to go straight.
And that's the key. Gusty wind is even worse than steady wind because it's unpredictable. It hits the car in these sudden shocks.
So it's forcing you to make all these tiny corrections.
Right. And each correction uses up a little bit of your friction budget just to stay in your lane, which means you have less available for an emergency maneuver if you need it.
Okay. The second environmental risk was a sudden change in road surface level. The examples they gave were things like hitting a sinkhole or a road that's muckled from a burst water pipe.
And these aren't just uncomfortable bumps. They are violently destabilizing because they introduce a massive shock load to only one side of the vehicle.
Ah, so it's asymmetrical.
It's totally asymmetrical. If one wheel suddenly drops into a pothole, that corner of the car momentarily loses contact or undergoes this extreme compression. Your suspension can't react fast enough, and the whole car is thrown off balance.
And you're fighting inertia while basically driving on three wheels with good grip.
For a split second, yes.
Now, let's talk about the third and probably the most common factor, which ties right back to friction, the condition of the road itself.
This is where drivers often get into trouble. A good driver knows how to steer, but a safe driver understands how the road surface can betray them. We're talking about ice, loose gravel, or a lot of water.
Let's start with water. Hydroplaning. What's actually happening there?
Hydroplaning happens when your tire hits a patch of water faster than the tread can channel it away. So instead of the tire touching the road,
It's riding on top of the water.
it's riding on a thin film of water. That film is a lubricant, and it instantly drops your coefficient of friction to almost zero. You're effectively water skiing.
And when you're floating, you have no steering, no braking. The car is just going to follow its inertia.
That's the moment of terror. Loose gravel works in a similar way. Instead of rubber on asphalt, you now have thousands of tiny rolling ball bearings between your tire and the road.
It's the same fundamental problem as ice, then.
Essentially, yes. Ice just presents you with a solid surface that has an inherently low coefficient of friction to begin with. Black ice is the worst because you don't see it coming.
So if a dry road gives you 100% of your friction budget,
Ice might only give you 10%. So every single input, braking, turning, accelerating has to be done so gently that it stays within that tiny, tiny budget. If you exceed it, you slide.
So all these sudden instigators, the gust of wind, the pothole, the patch of ice, they all work by either hitting the car with a massive asymmetrical force or by just stealing the friction we rely on.
That synthesis is the core lesson here. Real safety depends on your ability to connect that external event to the physical force it undermines. If you see an icy bridge ahead, you know friction is about to disappear.
Which means inertia and centrifugal force are about to become dominant.
And instantly destabilizing. If you feel a strong crosswind pushing the car, you know you're already using up your friction budget just to drive straight. So you have less in reserve for an emergency stop. That knowledge puts you miles ahead of the driver who's just reacting.
So the knowledge of these external forces, gravity's load transfer, wind sideways push, friction loss from water or gravel, that's the foundation for knowing what to do when your car starts acting weird.
It is.
Which really brings us to the core question you should always be asking yourself. Why is the car responding differently than I expect? If the steering suddenly feels light, knowing about these forces helps you diagnose if the problem is, say, a patch of ice that just stole your friction budget.
That's the real shift in perspective we hope you take away from this. The challenge isn't just about learning how to react to a slide once it's already started. I mean, that's a high-skill maneuver in itself. The real mastery is anticipating when these external forces are about to become a risk. It's about seeing that patch of wet leaves in a corner and proactively adapting your speed and your inputs to keep the forces of stability firmly in your control.
Please like, subscribe, and get notified.